Hi, thank you so much for joining me this afternoon. I'm so excited to share my research with you. It's been such a joy to work on and to write. My name is Jessie Guerriero. I'm a senior Catholic Studies major, and I chose to research and write on the lived theology of the motto Ave Crux Spes Unica, which is the motto of the Congregation of Holy Cross. Um, Yes, I'm so excited to share this with you and my personal connection. Just to begin, the Congregation of Holy Cross is really special to me. I went to a Holy Cross high school in Ohio, Archbishop Hoban. There, I was really introduced to the mission, and I also had the pleasure to work with the brothers very closely. I had brothers as teachers and administrators, faculty, mentors, and that really informed and shaped my understanding of the congregation. And they really encouraged me to attend this university to continue this education in the Holy Cross tradition. And so St. Ed's is unique in that it is sponsored by the Brothers of Holy Cross. And so that's been really wonderful for me personally. I've been able to meet and engage with both brothers and priests in college, starting with Brother Daly, my very first semester of college as a professor, and then knowing Father Peter very well and other priests down the street at St. Ignatius. So this has really added to my understanding of the mission, as well as faculty and staff who really care and live out this mission every day, and other students and peers as well. And my whole understanding of Holy Cross was even further broadened in the summer of 2018 when I was able to go to Uganda, and I lived in Jinja for a few weeks with Holy Cross priests. And I attended and shadowed at Holy Cross Lakeview, which is a secondary school there. And that's what the picture in the bottom right corner is. And that was a really wonderful experience to be able to see the global mission of Holy Cross for the first time and to really understand it, which was really awesome and incredible. And so when it was time to decide what to do my thesis on, it was honestly an easy decision that it was going to be over something with Holy Cross because it has just been so influential to me, and so impactful on my own faith and on my own life and what I want to study and the work that I hope to do someday. And the question was just kind of what and where I was going to go with it. And so I started with a deep dive in the history of Holy Cross starting last spring. And I really examined it and I read a lot of books on it. And so that was the first step. And then I also spent time in the archives. St. Ed's has archives on campus for the Midwest province. And I got to read news notes and letters from brothers to each other. And it was such a wonderful way to really intimately connect with people who were so passionate about the Congregation of Holy Cross. And then this fall, I continued my research by interviewing. And I interviewed a few brothers, Father Carl, and two lay people as well who were connected to the congregation. And so um, that was the research that I did for this project. And so I want to start my presentation really with just a brief look at the history of the Congregation of Holy Cross, because this is important to why it is the way that it is and why this mission exists, and especially why the motto exists. Holy Cross was originally founded as just the Brothers of St. Joseph by Father Dujarier in 1820 in southern France, Le Mans, France specifically. And Father Dujarier had just lived through the French Revolution, as had many of them, and France was just a bit of a mess and was really in need of help. And he saw it really in need of Catholic education. And so that's where this founding came out of. And just 15 years later, his health had rapidly declined, and he asked Father Moreau to govern the brothers after him, and Father Moreau accepted. And Moreau was the one who then founded the Congregation of Holy Cross. And so he took the Brothers of St. Joseph's and he had auxiliary priests and he combined them together to be the Holy Cross, or the Congregation of Holy Cross, excuse me. And then all of this kept expanding and they were really thriving in France and really needed and really vibrant and growing. And they actually expanded all the way to Algeria and the United States around 1840. And then just Very shortly after that, they arrived in South Bend, Indiana. They came down to Austin, Texas, and founded St. Ed's in 1877. And now Holy Cross is present all over the world in 16 countries. And here in the United States, they run or sponsor 6 universities, 17 secondary schools, 14 parishes, and 10 missionary outreach and social justice centers. And that's just here in the United States. So, as I mentioned, they are all over the world, different continents, different countries, doing a lot of different work, but all with the same mission and all with the same motto of Ave Crux Spes Unica. And when I went about my research, I knew I needed some kind of a framework to work off of. And I read this book called Lived Theology, New Perspectives on Method, Style, and Pedagogy. And the introduction's by Charles Marsh, and he really outlines what this means. And he talks about 4 key elements that I pulled out. These really stood out to me when I was reading it as being really important to my research. And the first is an honest narrative because it allows for more voices in a church of outcasts. And I really loved this idea because Holy Cross really emphasizes the idea of including the poor, including the vulnerable, including the marginalized. And it's really important to remember that. Those people are part of the church too, and their voices matter. And that's part of our research as theologians, as historians, as people of faith. It's important to remember all of the voices, and that narrative is an important element of it. And then the second point was engagement and inclusion, and that lived experience is a valuable source. I really liked this one as well because it's saying that all voices are important, not just theologians, and that just your lived experience is valid and valid as an academic source too. And then the third point is that God's presence in human experiences. And so that's something that you're really looking for and you're really examining in this research. And that makes it distinct from lived religion. And then the fourth point is that it's messy, personal, and curious. It's just inherently personal, and it sets models for our daily life. This was really important to my research because I found it to be true in my own life, and I found it to be true in the people that I interviewed as well. That the idea of living out this mission in your everyday life, living out this motto, it is personal, it is messy, but it's also curious and it's also really interesting. And there are people who set the model for you, and there are people that you are also setting a model for as well. And so that was the framework that I worked off of when I began my interviews. And so I interviewed Brother Richard Daly, who, as I mentioned, I had as a professor and who I've been very close to ever since then. Brother Joel, who was the interim president of the Institute of Holy Cross for 11 years. Father Carl, who works down the street from St. Ed's, St. Ignatius, Martyr Parish. And he's someone that I've been very lucky to work with and also just know and have as a mentor and a friend. And Dr. Marco Clark, who is the new president of the Institute of Holy Cross and who has a history of being an employee of Holy Cross schools, as well as an alumni. And then Dr. Andrew Brawl, who's the provost here at St. Ed's and has this deep passion for Catholic education. And so what I pulled out of my interviews were 3 key themes. And the first is the cross. And Brother Daly described the cross as prophetic, that suffering and self-sacrifice are necessary points of ministry. And I thought this was a really fascinating point, that the cross is pointing at our lives, that our lives are going to suffer, and there are going to be moments where we have our own crosses, particularly those who have ministered in the Holy Cross, perhaps have carried a cross, and that they must also self-sacrifice. But Father Carl, calls it a euphemism for love, which is very different than this idea of it being prophetic of our own lives. And he says it's the greatest example of divine and human love that combines to save us. And these ideas really seem to juxtapose each other. because Brother Dailies is saying that we're going to suffer, and Father Carl is saying that this is love. But I think the idea is that they actually are the same and they actually do hurt, and it does require self sacrifice, but it also is an act of love because Jesus's act did hurt and it was painful, but it was the greatest example of love. And so we are called to do the same. And so we are called to love even when it's really hard and even when it hurts. And this leads to action based ministry because oftentimes we see other people carrying a cross, right? And so this was the second point that I pulled out of my interviews. And Brother Joel said that when he's facing someone who's encountering a cross, I ask, what can I do or who can I implore to help them? And this is a key element of the Congregation of Holy Cross, that they care deeply about people, so much so that it's not just them saying, we're going to go pray for you, we're going to go hope that things work out. They are going to actually do something for you if they can. And if they can't personally do it, they're going to find someone who can. There's this deep commitment to serving other people. And you see that lived out in their preferential option for the poor, in the way that they choose people deliberately and intentionally, in the way that they minister. And Dr. Prahl also commented on this, that we're called to walk with people in their suffering and to have a ministry of presence with those who are persecuted. And Dr. Prahl even shared that this is why he was so interested in working at St. Ed's, because it's a university that truly lives this out in the way that they walk with students who are marginalized and who are outcasts. But the third point is hope. And Dr. Clark said, Jesus' walk on earth was a promise of hope now. And now for every Good Friday, there's an Easter Sunday. And Dr. Clark spoke passionately about hope and how important it is to him personally. And he shared a quote by Pope Benedict, and it's, those who have hope act differently. And we both reflected on how true that is and how true that is at the Congregation of Holy Cross. You can often hear the brothers saying that they have hope for a better tomorrow and that they're educating for a better future. And so the whole point of their work is that they have hope for a better world and a more just world. And Brother Daly connects that hope directly to the cross. He says that he can have hope in other things. Perhaps we have hope in our political leaders, in our education, but ultimately it's connected to the cross. And so it's inseparable from Jesus. And so both of them really connected this to Jesus, and Jesus, more importantly, on the cross. And then Dr. Clark took that to say on the cross and then on Easter Sunday when he resurrected. And that's the ultimate idea of Hail the Cross, our only hope, is that there is suffering and there is pain, but there's also going to be rejoicing. And I would like to share this quote from Father Carl in our interview. He said, "Hail that moment in which God's love was so fully manifested for all the world to see. And that's our only hope." And when he said that, it really struck me, because how true is that? I think so often as historians, we examine the cross as a historical event that happened. And as theologians, we examine what happened after that in this history of Christianity. And as people of faith, we often walk into a church and are just so used to it that we're numb to it, that we don't even really notice it. But that image of the cross is so grotesque and it's so painful, but it's also so beautiful because it's so fully manifested of God's love. And that's our hope. And so sometimes I think we need to step back and look at it. And the Congregation of Holy Cross really does that. And that's the whole point of their ministry. And that's why their motto is Ave Crux Spes Unica. And out of all of my research, I pulled 3 implications for what it means to be the lived theology of Hail the Cross, our only hope. The first is the poor and vulnerable. They're given a voice and they're valued in the cross. As I mentioned, and as many of the people I interviewed mentioned, is that this is really key and really important to them and to the congregation, is that they walk with the marginalized and they walk with the outcasts. Because the cross is for everyone. It's not just for a few chosen people. The cross is also a revelation of love, and it's salvific because Christ shows us ultimate love and mercy. And this is really important as well because the cross is painful, as Brother Daly said, but it's also love. Um, and so we are also called to love. Um, and we're called to imitate Christ, sometimes quite literally, but we are there to really do this in our own lives and to try to follow Christ in this way, but also to know that He made the sacrifice for us as a revelation of God's unending love for humanity and for all of us individually. And then this idea of only, because that's a key part of the phrase, hail the cross, our only hope. And this requires complete surrender. There's depth to hope. That's what Dr. Prahl told me, and I really haven't stopped thinking about that idea. But no matter how much depth there is to it, ultimately it has to all be given to the cross, to Jesus. And Brother Daly talks about that. Even if you have hope in other things, ultimately it comes down to Christ. And so that's the part that we're asked to do. I think that Jesus did the cross, and we're asked to put all of our hope in it. And so, this idea of Ave Crux Spes Unica is that no matter what we're doing in our lives, hail the cross, our only hope is going to be lived out in each and every moment.